Coach Williams had been acting strange all season. His announcement in the middle of the championship game revealed why our kids had been losing every match. I should have seen the signs earlier. The way Coach Williams kept checking his phone during practice, how he'd pace the sidelines like a caged animal, and those hushed phone conversations he'd have behind the dugout. My 8-year-old had been coming home from every game looking defeated, shoulders slumped, asking me why they couldn't win just one game. The season started off normal enough. Coach Williams seemed like any other volunteer parent trying to teach kids the basics of baseball. He was enthusiastic, showed up early to set up the equipment, and always brought orange slices for halftime. But as the weeks went on, something shifted. The kids were getting worse instead of better, which made no sense given how much time they were spending at practice. I started noticing things that didn't add up. During batting practice, he'd tell the kids to swing at pitches that were clearly outside the strike zone. When they questioned him, he'd say he was teaching them to be aggressive hitters. During fielding drills, he'd position them in completely wrong spots, then act frustrated when they couldn't make plays. The other parents and I would exchange worried glances, but we didn't want to be those parents who criticized the volunteer coach. The losses piled up. Game after game, our kids would walk off the field with their heads down while the opposing teams celebrated. What broke my heart most was watching my son practice his swing in the backyard for hours, trying so hard to get better, only to strike out again and again during games. He'd come to me after particularly rough games, tears in his eyes, asking if he was just not cut out for baseball. By mid-season, the pattern was unmistakable. We weren't just losing games, we were losing them in spectacular fashion. Scores like 15-2 and 18-1 became the norm. Other teams started going easy on us, which somehow made it worse. The kids could sense the pity, and it crushed their spirits even more. Some parents started pulling their children from the team, saying they didn't want their kids to develop a complex about sports. Coach Williams became increasingly erratic. He'd show up to games looking haggard with dark circles under his eyes. During one particularly brutal loss, I saw him on his phone in the parking lot afterward, and I could hear him saying something about needing more time. His voice sounded desperate, scared even. When he noticed me nearby, he quickly ended the call and hurried to his car without his usual post-game pep talk to the kids. The championship game arrived, and despite our terrible record, we'd somehow qualified for the tournament bracket due to some technicality with league rules. I honestly didn't want to put my son through another humiliating defeat, but he begged me to let him play. He said this might be their chance to finally win one, and the hope in his voice made it impossible to say no. The game started typically enough. We were down by 3 runs in the 4th inning, and I was mentally preparing my post-game speech about effort being more important than winning. The kids looked defeated already, going through the motions they'd perfected over months of losing. Then something unprecedented happened. Coach Williams called timeout. He walked to the center of the field, and in a voice loud enough for everyone in the stands to hear, he made an announcement that changed everything. He confessed that he had been deliberately coaching our kids to lose all season because he had been betting against them to pay off gambling debts. The words hit like a physical blow to every parent in those bleachers. The silence that followed was deafening. Parents sat frozen, processing what they'd just heard. Then the chaos erupted. Mothers were screaming, fathers were jumping down from the stands, and someone was already on their phone, presumably calling league officials. My own hands were shaking as the full weight of his betrayal sank in. All those months of watching my child's confidence crumble, thinking he just wasn't good at baseball, when really his own coach was sabotaging him. Coach Williams continued his confession, detailing how he had been teaching wrong techniques and giving bad game strategies. He explained how he'd tell kids to swing at bad pitches, position fielders incorrectly, and give them advice that would guarantee failure. The betting money had started as a way to cover some financial problems, but it snowballed into something he couldn't control. His voice cracked as he said he couldn't live with the guilt anymore and was confessing everything. The kids stood on the field looking confused and hurt. My son's face went through a range of emotions: confusion, understanding, then pure heartbreak as he realized his coach had been lying to him all season. Several of the younger kids started crying. They'd trusted this man, looked up to him, and he'd been setting them up to fail from day one. The opposing team had stopped their celebration and were watching the drama unfold with wide eyes. Parents were shouting questions and accusations. How long had this been going on? How much money was involved? Who else knew? The anger was palpable, and I found myself fighting back tears of rage. This man had stolen something precious from these children: their confidence, their love of the game, their belief in adults who were supposed to protect them. But then something completely unexpected happened. The opposing team's coach came running over from their dugout, and what he said next turned everything upside down. He revealed that this was all part of an elaborate motivational strategy they had planned together. The confession, the betting story, all of it was theater designed to light a fire under our kids. Update 1. The revelation that this was all planned left everyone stunned into silence. The opposing coach explained that he and Coach Williams had noticed our team's potential early in the season but saw that the kids lacked confidence and fighting spirit. They'd devised this elaborate scheme to give them something to prove, something to fight against. According to him, our kids had actually been improving dramatically behind the scenes, and this fake betrayal was designed to make them play with heart and determination. I didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or tackle both coaches right there on the field. The emotional whiplash was intense. 1 minute, I'm ready to call the police on Coach Williams for child abuse, and the next minute, I'm supposed to believe this was all some twisted psychological experiment designed to help our kids? The kids' reactions were mixed and heartbreaking to watch. Some of them looked relieved that their coach hadn't actually betrayed them, while others seemed even more confused and hurt by the deception. My own son stood there trying to process whether he should be grateful or angry that adults had manipulated him so thoroughly. The trust issues this could create seemed potentially worse than just having a legitimately bad coach. But something remarkable started happening on the field. Maybe it was the adrenaline from all the emotional chaos, or maybe there really was something to the coach's psychological strategy. But our kids began playing like completely different children. They were swinging with confidence, making plays they'd never made before, and communicating with each other in ways I'd never seen all season. The game resumed, and it was like watching a miracle unfold. Kids who had been striking out consistently all season were making solid contact with the ball. My son, who hadn't gotten a hit in weeks, drove a ball to the gap in right center field for a double. The parents in the stands were going crazy, torn between celebrating these amazing plays and still processing the emotional manipulation we'd all just experienced. Inning by inning, our team clawed back into the game. They were playing with an intensity and focus that had been missing all season. Every at-bat felt crucial, every defensive play was executed with precision, and the kids were encouraging each other in ways that brought tears to my eyes. Whether the coach's strategy was ethical or not, it was undeniably working. The opposing team, who had been dominating us all season, suddenly found themselves in a real battle. Our kids had found something inside themselves that had been dormant all year. They were playing not just to win, but to prove something to themselves and to the adults who had doubted their abilities. Update 2. As the game progressed into the later innings, the transformation in our kids became even more pronounced. They weren't just playing better baseball, they were playing like a completely different team. The confidence that had been systematically destroyed over months of losses was rebuilding itself in real time, and it was beautiful and heartbreaking to witness. My son came up to bat in the bottom of the 6th inning with 2 runners on base and our team down by 1 run. This was the same kid who had been asking me if he was just bad at baseball, now standing in the batter's box with a determination I'd never seen before. The pitch came in, and he connected with a sound that every baseball parent knows, that perfect crack of bat meeting ball at just the right spot. The ball sailed over the left field fence for a 3-run home run. As he rounded the bases, I found myself sobbing in the stands. Not just because of the home run, but because of everything this moment represented. All the frustration, the self-doubt, the nights he'd practiced alone in the backyard thinking he wasn't good enough. It was all pouring out in this moment of pure triumph. The other parents were experiencing similar emotional releases. We'd all watched our children struggle and question themselves for months, and now we were seeing them succeed in ways we'd only dreamed of. But there was still this underlying tension about the method used to get here. Had the coaches gone too far? Was this kind of psychological manipulation of children ever justified? Even if it worked, Coach Williams approached me after my son's home run, and I could see genuine emotion in his eyes. He explained that watching these kids lose confidence week after week had been tearing him apart. He and the other coach had spent hours discussing whether their plan was too extreme, but they believed these children had so much potential that was being wasted by their own mental barriers. He told me about all the things they'd actually been working on during those practices that looked so disorganized to us parents. While they were publicly teaching wrong techniques during games, they'd been secretly drilling proper fundamentals during private sessions. They'd been building muscle memory and skills while simultaneously creating a psychological environment that would eventually motivate the kids to push past their limitations. The final inning was pure magic. Our kids played with the heart and determination that the coaches had hoped to unlock. Every play was executed with precision. Every at-bat was approached with confidence. And the team chemistry that had been missing all season suddenly clicked into place. They were playing for each other, for their own sense of worth, and for the joy of the game itself. When the final out was made and we won the championship, the explosion of joy from our kids was unlike anything I'd ever witnessed. They'd gone from a team that couldn't win a single game to champions, but more importantly, they'd rediscovered their love for baseball and their belief in themselves. They were hugging, crying, and celebrating not just the victory, but their own transformation. Final update. Our team won the championship that day, but the victory was complicated by everything that had led to it. In the immediate aftermath, as parents and kids celebrated on the field, there was still this underlying tension about whether what the coaches had done was right or wrong. The joy was real, the improvement was undeniable, but the methods remained questionable. Over the following days and weeks, the story of our championship spread throughout the local baseball community. Some people praised the coaches for their innovative approach to motivation, while others criticized them for psychologically manipulating children. The league officials launched an investigation, though technically no actual rules had been broken since there was no real gambling involved. The most important voices in this debate, however, were the kids themselves. In the days after the championship, I had long conversations with my son about what had happened. His perspective was surprisingly mature for an 8-year-old. He said that while the deception had hurt his feelings initially, he was ultimately grateful for the experience because it taught him that he was capable of much more than he'd believed. Other parents reported similar conversations with their children. Most of the kids seemed to understand that the coaches had taken an unusual approach to help them succeed, and they appreciated the results even if they didn't fully grasp the psychological complexity of what had occurred. They'd learned that sometimes the biggest obstacles to success are the limitations we place on ourselves. The opposing coach later explained their strategy in more detail during a meeting with league officials and parents. They'd identified that our kids had all the physical skills necessary to compete but lacked the mental toughness and confidence needed to execute under pressure. Traditional positive reinforcement wasn't working because the losses had created a cycle of self-doubt that seemed impossible to break. Their solution was to create an external enemy, in this case, the false betrayal by Coach Williams, that would unite the team and give them something concrete to fight against. They'd studied sports psychology and found examples of teams that had used adversity as motivation, but they acknowledged that manufacturing that adversity through deception was ethically questionable. The investigation concluded that while the coaches' methods were unconventional and potentially problematic, they hadn't violated any specific league rules. Coach Williams was required to attend a workshop on appropriate coaching methods, and the league implemented new guidelines about transparency in coaching strategies. But our championship title stood, and more importantly, the kids' improved confidence and skills remained. Months later, as the next season began, our kids continued to play with the confidence and skill they discovered during that championship game. They'd learned something valuable about their own potential and their ability to overcome adversity. Whether the coach's method was right or wrong, the results had been transformative for these children. The experience taught me something important about parenting and about life in general. Sometimes the path to growth and success isn't straightforward or comfortable. Sometimes it requires us to question our assumptions, push past our limitations, and find strength we didn't know we had. The coach's deception was ethically complicated, but it had ultimately served a purpose that traditional methods hadn't achieved. Looking back, I'm still not sure if I would have approved of the coach's plan if they'd asked for permission beforehand. The risk of psychological damage to the children was real, and the deception violated basic principles of trust between coaches and families. But seeing my son's transformation from a defeated child who questioned his own abilities to a confident young athlete who believed in himself, that change was invaluable. The championship trophy sits on my son's shelf, but the real victory was the lesson he learned about his own resilience and potential. He discovered that sometimes the biggest opponent you face isn't the other team, it's your own self-doubt. And sometimes, with the right motivation and support, you can overcome obstacles that once seemed impossible. The coach's gamble had paid off, but it had also sparked important conversations in our community about the ethics of youth sports, the role of adults in children's development, and the complex balance between pushing kids to excel and protecting their emotional well-being. Those conversations continue to this day, and they've made all of us more thoughtful about how we approach coaching and parenting. Our kids learned that they were capable of much more than they'd believed, and that sometimes the greatest victories come not from beating others, but from overcoming your own limitations. It was a lesson that extended far beyond baseball and into every aspect of their young lives. And for that transformation, despite all the ethical complications, I remain grateful to this day.